All right, well, hello everyone. Is everyone feeling great? Yay! You're powered by Rioja, 70% Rioja this morning. So we're going to use this session to reflect on what we've seen and learned, to put it in some context for Rioja, but also for Spain. And also, actually, we'd really like to ask for your help in kind of taking the learnings that you've built up over the last couple of days, and then really from the Old Vine Conference perspective, we would really love your help and ideas and kind of ongoing support as to how we can really make a difference for the Old Vine heritage, not just of Rioja, but also for Spain. And you've seen the incredible kind of craft and commitment and connection that's required, that is the price that's kind of paid for growing wine in this way, but actually that entire attitude towards wine as a kind of an agricultural and cultural craft is in danger. And we also, of course, have the danger of this genetic erosion, this loss of biodiversity in wine, which is remains a real threat. So I'm going to start by just giving you an overview of basically the Old Vine Conference. I'm so sorry, I keep glitching out with this thing. All right, and Old Vines in Spain. Well, the Old Vine Conference started as a lockdown project. It's a non-profit. I'm one of 3 co-founders. And essentially, we want to create a category for old vine wines so that when you use those terms, it has the same kind of resonance and value as other kind of categories in wine, so that all the way from the vineyard through to the point of purchase and consumption, that old vine adds value, because it's only through adding value that you can stop this loss of vineyards, because many old vineyards, we've seen many that have been preserved today in this trip, but many old vineyards simply can't be made to pay, and we don't know what's in there. We don't know what we're losing. Imagine if the vineyard that we saw on Wednesday had been lost, or those vines had been dug up, as a lot of them have been. So the whole point behind what we set up with the Old Vine Conference is to get industry, producers and trade to work together to basically make this value present. I'm so sorry, I keep losing my connection. Come on. Oh, good. Okay. And I might just... Yeah, I'm so sorry. While
it works, just por traducir un poquito, no sé si habéis entendido todo, pero bueno, Sarah estaba contando lo que es Old Vine Conference, que es un movimiento que nació durante la pandemia, con el objetivo, es una organización sin ánimo de lucro, pero lo que busca es generar debate en torno a la importancia de la viña vieja en diferentes partes del mundo, ¿no? Entonces, aparte de sesiones formativas que ellos desarrollan en Londres cada cierto tiempo, al mismo tiempo pues viajan a diferentes zonas. Y esto les ha servido también, y es un poco el foro de debate de hoy, para poner en valor algunas de las cosas que hemos hecho. Y ponía el ejemplo de, imaginaos si lo que vimos el miércoles, que fuimos a Bodegas, pues alguien, de no ser por vosotros, lo hubiese arrancado, ¿no? El valor incalculable que se habría perdido. Entonces, el movimiento Old Vine Conference sirve para esto.
Thank you. So why Old Vines? First of all, they're a real lightning rod for talent, as I think we've seen today. They attract some of the most visionary, creative and connected winemakers and vine growers. The best old vines, not all old vines are great, but the great ones just, I think, real uniquely transcendent wines with this real energy and also real connection to place, to symbolism and to heritage. The genetic material of ancient vineyards is vital in adapting to climate change, as we've seen. And also the economic and social relevance of old vines is really empowering and lifts up many traditional regions. But actually the structure of the wine industry makes it hard often for that value to be realized and when it comes to the sale. And healthy old vineyards with this cultural resonance and unique potential are being lost because they can't be made to pay. So this is why we exist as the Old Vine Conference, to try and change this. And thank you all for your time coming on this trip to be part of that. A quick thing of the story so far. Basically, what we found is that this has a resonance. It's really taken off. We've been able to collaborate with Jancis Robinson. We've established an Old Vine registry. The Old Vine Conference online has generated a lot of connection and attention. And these field trips have turned out to be one of the most sort of inspiring and sort of powerful things that we've done. So thank you for coming on this trip. Essentially, there is something in it. This is as a lens of looking at wine, looking at it through an Old Vine lens, kind of cracks open the viticultural heart of wine. And we need to be able to talk about how wine is grown without it being, academic or seeming too technical or too far removed to be relatable to wine consumers. Is that okay? Shall I carry on?
Bueno, básicamente lo que he hecho ha sido ahondar un poco en lo que hemos comentado antes, ¿no? La importancia que para ella tiene la Old Vine Conference como movimiento y bueno, ha estado explicando un poquito algunas de las cifras de dónde nació, cómo surgió todo esto y la interacción que tiene a nivel de social media, bueno, un poco con todos los actores que participan en este proyecto.
So we're... Sorry.
Un poquito más, más adelante compartiremos la presentación, pero simplemente para que veáis la foto.
Okay.
So we're a non-profit organisation. We are powered by members and sponsorship. And we've been really successful in attracting fantastic members and sponsorship. We also have volunteers who help us. So our regional ambassadors are wine experts all around the world who are knowledgeable about old vines in their area. And they basically help to connect not just people within their region, but across regions. So for example, we've been able to connect growers in South Africa with growers in Gascony when they're talking about how they went about having their vineyards classified as a national monument. So we're able to really help, and that's through the network of regional ambassadors. There are actually, there's some more regional ambassadors to be added to this, but we're always looking for that kind of the community to grow and to basically, we find that it's a really inspiring way and it's a really unifying way to market wine and to talk about wine. So how old is old? There are old vine projects around the world and they have various different minimum vine ages. 35 years in South Africa and Barossa, 30 for the Vinho project, which is in Mole, Chile. Lodi, USA, 50 years old. Here in Rioja, 35 years if you want to use the old vine designation in the Viñedos Singulares. And in Priorat, the Consejo Regulador there has introduced this minimum vine age of 70 years if you want to use the designation on the label. So actually it's being added and incorporated into regulations. And I think it's okay that you have different minimum ages in different regions because it's highly localized. What makes a vine old in a given region can be highly specific to that region. But the point is you start that conversation in that context. Okay. So the Old Vine Conference, we partnered with Jancis Robinson and we, through a grant from Jackson Family Wines, we're able to build this database online. So it's called the Old Vine Registry. It's free to use. It's a listing of old vineyards all around the world. And we now have 2,751 entries. We have 400 vineyards registered from Spain. So come on, Spain, add your vineyard. Because actually Spain probably has more old vineyards than anywhere else in the world, but it's not using them. Yeah.
Ellos han creado un registro de old vines, ¿vale? De todo el mundo. Entonces ellos, bueno, aparte de la edad media del viñedo viejo según qué denominaciones de origen, países o regiones. Aquí vemos en Chile, Sudáfrica, Australia, Priorat, Rioja, pero sobre todo lo relevante para mí es un registro de viñedo viejo de todo el mundo, donde tiene 2.750 entradas en todo el mundo, 2.751 entradas en todo el mundo, de las cuales 400 son de España, es decir, 400 viñedos viejos. Y ella lo que dice es, en España hay mucho más, que seguramente de 400 viñas viejas, por tanto nos anima a participar y a engrosar esta lista.
So this registry is free to enter, so it's a crowdsourced global registry of historic vineyard sites. It's run by volunteers led by the amazing Olda Yarrow, and essentially you can submit your vineyard, it's moderated by the team, and then we have this online database which is being used when people are researching. And I think the minute when you name something, when you log something, you show that you value it. And that's so absolutely fundamental to the way that humans think. And I think this is why it's so important that we capture this information. So for those of you who are based in Spain, please tell your colleagues and friends about this and get them to submit the vineyards, because actually at the moment there's 400 entries from Spain, but I mean Spain could almost get 2,000 entries just on its own, and I think have them logged, use this, it's free, and then it becomes a really great resource for us to be able to plan our conferences, to respond to journalistic inquiries and so on. So good news about Spain and old vines. More old vines than any other country, probably, we think. Some of the very oldest vines in the world. You have a unique arc of pre-phylloxera and ungrafted wine, and it is like an arc, like a genetic arc. You have a minimum vine age becoming part of the quality hierarchy, and actually old vines power some of the most iconic famous wines in Spain. They're all powered by old vineyards. And actually, old vine heritage lifts up perceptions of quality. So, for example, Elias López Montero in La Mancha, through his focus on old vine RN, has basically completely revolutionized the idea that you can make high quality wine there. So old vines done well have a premiumizing effect. And then also, as we've seen this just this week, there is the technical academic capability in Spain to really support old vine research and genetics, as you've shown.
Bueno, lo que está contando es que anima a todas las bodegas a engrosar ese listado de proveedores de viña vieja, que ahora mismo hay 400 en España registradas en esta página web, pero que está segura que tiene muchísimas más, y que a pesar de todo hay una serie de buenas noticias, porque España no deja de ser, casi con toda seguridad, el lugar del mundo donde más viñedo viejo hay. Y bueno, pues ponía ejemplos de algunos de los productores que han logrado elaborar vinos icónicos, pues hemos visto Pingus, La Ermita, La Faraona, Numancia, Tesolamoza, etc. Y además también empresas y organismos que trabajan en temas de research, de investigación, como lo que estáis haciendo también vosotros, que obviamente debemos ser protagonistas también de este crecimiento del conocimiento de la viña vieja.
So you're in a really strong position in Spain, and you could really lead, I think, from with the old vine story for Europe. But basically, you're losing old vineyards really quickly in Spain. This is some information on La Mancha. They've lost 40% of their vineyard over 30 years. And of course, wine regions have to change and adapt. And sometimes there is oversupply. But it's just to be conscious that somewhere among, these vineyards that are being lost, you have to be aware that there could be treasure there. There could be genetic treasure. And you've been very aware of that here, but that's not the case everywhere in Spain. And then Pablo Rubio estimates that between 1999 and 2014, almost 2/3 of Ribera del Duero's old vineyards have been lost. That's an enormous loss. And basically, it's back to this problem in the market. So the prices for the old vines and young vines don't represent the differential in the effort and the cost it takes to farm those vineyards. And so that's why we have to change the market and add this value. Juan Carlos Sancha, a great winemaker and academic of Rioja. This is his data on the area of 40-year-old plus vineyards in Rioja. So you can see even in Rioja, where we have established projects like this, you're still under threat, basically. You can view these presentations at our website, www.oldvines, because they were recorded as part of previous Old Vine online conferences. So you're in a good position. However, don't be complacent. But you've got producers around the country who are really in a great position to do things about this. So obviously, we all know about Amaran, but Fernando Moro is a master of wine. He actually has developed a model for integrating heritage vineyards in his MW thesis. Numancia, they're one of our founding members, and Lucas Lowy at Numancia is really putting the old vine heritage central. So Numancia became more of a kind of a winemaker's wine, and he's really repositioned that wine and made it much more about the vineyards, with a resulting actual change in style, which has been really successful. This is our activity, all the things that we do. Essentially, we do a lot of activities and the field trips. Thank you so much for being on one of them. And we would just love to maintain the connection and relationship with you. So thank you so much for your time. Essentially, you can become members as individuals. If you're working in the trade, you can think about how you can make the story of Old Vine heritage really compelling for your customers. Alliance are one of our trade members, so thank you for that. For example, they highlight their Old Vine wines on their website. And then I thought this was just a great quote. Wine from an old vine in the wrong place offers no better quality than a young wine in a fantastic location. However, if everything coincides, old vines give us the very best, something fascinating due to the mystery that they carry inside, what I call the wisdom of old vines. And then I just wanted to pick up on something. This is a poem, a quote from a poem, which I think really highlights that we kind of have this accidental treasure, and all the old vineyards that we have come out of a kind of frugality and a method of farming when people were simply farming with minimum waste. So they planted them to grow old because they didn't want the effort and the cost of having to replant every 20 years. So this is really about, this poem talks about all craftsmen share a knowledge. They've held reality down, fluttering to a bench. And I think this is the sense of this craft of viticulture and how that relates to tradition and heritage. They've been concerned with prison, not escape. So they're just, all of these methods of pruning, the methods of the field blend are all there to save effort, but to make great quality. And it's out of this kind of, struggle that they make this inadvertent art. So I think what we have now is we realize this is something actually really rather beautiful and unique, but it's an accident that it's come together in that way. But really it's also an accident that these vineyards still survive, and we can't keep relying on accidents. So this is why we need to log them. It's why we need to have a registry so that we don't accidentally lose this sort of mysterious but rather beautiful store of old vineyards and everything that they hold. Okay, so basically I've got a few questions for our guests. So do speak up, because otherwise I'm going to have to be like the school teacher and pick on people. And I'll pick on the person who's looking most sleepy. That's you, Donald.
No worries.
Okay, so questions to our guests.
No, I like it. I just like it clapping in Sarah's face.
I'm ready for my close-up. So what I'd really like to ask, especially for people who are working the trade, from what you've seen this week, how relevant are old vines in the market to you and your business? And do you see how you could talk about them or present them in a way that would engage your customers? I guess this would be a good question for Richard, actually. What do you think, Richard?
Just hold on. Lo que está preguntando ahora Sara, la primera de las preguntas para abrir el debate es si desde el punto de vista del trade, de la hostelería en este caso, de restaurantes en Londres, cómo de relevante es para ellos el consumo de vino, cómo venden ellos o cómo ponen en valor la viña vieja desde el punto de vista de la hostelería.
What was the question again? Yeah, old vines. I always, in the description for each of the wines, I always mention if the vines are old. It's really useful for me to see, how old is old. I think that's very important because it can be. Sometimes people say, "Oh, our wine it's made from old vines and they're only 20 years old," and I think, well, that feels a bit young to me. So if we have wine on the menu or on the list, which is 60 years old or something like that, I think it's brilliant to say something about that, because obviously it's dug that much deeper, it's far more interesting, it's so complex, and everything the vine has gone through, there's a real story to be said there. But I've got to say it in a short way. I can't have paragraphs and paragraphs for each of the wines, but I do think it's important, and I love drinking wine from old vines very much myself.
I mean, would you consider having something like, a symbol or, Heritage Vineyards icon or something next to certain wines?
I definitely, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, just have a little key to designate any wines which are from old vines. I think
you do the trade tastings, and I used to have the logo for the old vines, and it's great to go and see it because it's easier for me if I want that sort of context, so they could have it in a bar or restaurant as well.
Bueno, lo que Richard está diciendo es que para él definitivamente sí sería muy relevante, pues por ejemplo poner algún tipo de sello de logo que hable de old vines y poner en valor de alguna manera para que destaquen sobre la multitud los vinos elaborados con viña vieja. We have here Carlos Echavarría, best sommelier in Spain, and the one who led the last night dinner. And probably his experience is nice because I shared the information about the restaurant yesterday, but Venta Moncalvillo is a very small restaurant located in a very, very, very small village, 24 people living, one Michelin star restaurant. But his wine list, ¿cuántos vinos tienes en la carta?
1800.
1,800 wines in the wine list of the restaurant. Okay, so how do you manage that? I mean, in terms of old wine, ¿cómo destacas, o sea, dentro de esos 1.800 vinos, cómo juegas con ello y de alguna manera se pone en valor los que son de vino viejo? ¿Cómo juegas con una lista de vinos así?
Bueno, ya conoces que soy bastante radical y que me gusta decir las cosas como son o como las veo.
He's quite radical in the sense of talking about wines.
Bueno, yo creo que todo se está prostituyendo un poco y que realmente todo está perdiendo sentido.
Okay, he said that many things are losing the sense itself. I need you to explain.
Sí,
Tienes que entrar un poco más.
Vale, la cuestión es muy fácil. Yo abogo por la viña vieja y me creo la viña vieja. Pero resulta que si yo me creo el proyecto que tiene este grupo, porque he visitado con Rubén, con la gente de la bodega, y me lo creo, las bodegas comerciales se apuntan enseguida al carro. Entonces, si tú tienes, el mercado va por valorar la viña vieja, pues un gran grupo empresarial de momento dice, a ver qué viña vieja tenemos, hacemos un viñedo de esa vieja. Ahora se van los viñedos en altura, buscamos viñedo en altura. Ahora tal. Entonces, el problema es que todo el mundo se apunta al carro de vender lo que está de moda. Y el hecho de poner en una etiqueta el concepto de viña vieja o viña de altura o viña parcelario o reserva especial o lo que sea, no tiene ningún valor si el productor no ha desarrollado ese proyecto y le pone en cuestión.
All right. So what he says is obviously he knows and he believes in old vine projects and the work that some wineries are doing, as Ruben and Luis Cañas family is doing, and some other local producer, because he has seen this. Okay, he has the proof really of what old wine means. But there are certain large wine groups that once there is like a trend, okay, they all follow the path, and they are much bigger. So if now the trend is saying old vine, then a big group, a big wine company says, okay, I have one old wine over there, so I'm gonna say that my wines are also coming from old vines. So this is some kind of prostituido.
A sort of, I think he's implying a sort of deliberate confusion.
Okay, deliberate confusion. It's a polite way to say that. Okay? In the sense of, okay, now the trend is saying high altitude vineyards, old vine vineyards, and when the big wine group says, okay, I need to be leading this trend, although I'm not the leader properly, then everything is deliberate. How do you say that?
A deliberate confusion.
Deliberate confusion.
Is that when the Prosecco comes in and says you can't do that? They have to be title on there. Read it. This is an
That's a
old
different
vineyard.
conversation.
This is it.
Él pregunta si es entonces cuando el Consejo Regulador entra y dice esto no puede ser.
Pero el problema es, y lo hago muy corto, si yo encuentro en el mercado, como he encontrado en Rioja, un viñedo singular de viña vieja de más de 35 años en el mercado y la botella vale 12,50, pierde toda mi credibilidad.
Okay. He says that if he finds a wine on the market coming from a viñedo singular from Rioja, more than 35 years old, from a local producer, but the cost is €12.50, then the credibility of the wine falls down immediately.
Entonces, a la pregunta que me has hecho es, nunca una palabra en una etiqueta o en una carta de vinos le va a dar más valor que el criterio que el sumiller te lo recomiende por haber conocido la viña y haberlo vendido.
Okay, so what he says is that not a single word on the label saying old vine or whatever is going to have more credibility than the one that the sommelier, with its own experience, could have, visiting vineyards, getting to talk with the different winemakers or wineries, etc. So, well, that's basically his opinion about this.
Yeah.
Gracias.
And I think that question of credibility and authenticity is really important, and there are several countries or regions around the world that have addressed that need for it to be true. The fact that it's becoming recognized, that old vine kind of value is starting to become recognized to the point where it can be almost faked is I think two things. First of all, it shows that the value is there, but secondly, you're right. I think there has to be a kind of a collective action to ensure that these things are actually truthful. And you can involve the Consejo, but what they did in South Africa, for example, is all the producers who believed in it came together. They created a shared charter. And those producers had so much credibility and trust with all the kind of, the sommeliers are really important for this, with the sommeliers, with the trade, that they came up with a shared charter, a seal which is trademarked, with a system for authenticating the vineyards. And that has then created so much trust that they've really almost, they didn't even have to involve the regulatory authorities. It's now official, but they started by coming together.
Lo que está contando es que, por ejemplo, en Sudáfrica, lo que ellos hicieron fue crear un sello de calidad, de alguna manera, que avalase de una manera objetiva que ese vino procedía de viña vieja, donde tú puedes involucrar o no a los consejos reguladores. En el caso de Sudáfrica, involucraron a las diferentes bodegas, productores, viticultores. Los consejos tuvieron muy poquito peso, pero lo que han conseguido es un sello objetivable, que genera confianza tanto para las propias bodegas como para el consumidor, para hablar de vinos de viña vieja de una manera lo más objetiva posible.
O la WDP, ¿no? Además, la WDP también, PDP, en I think it helps in South Africa that you've got somebody of the stature of Ibn Saidi making like one of his key parts of his business, highlighting the old wine series wines.
Yeah.
And that's an icon figure saying this is what I think is important, and then everybody else falls in line behind it.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think that having leading brands setting the road forward is very important, and that has a knock-on effect. So having iconic producers such as Amaren leading the way, that has a knock-on effect that is beneficial to the region.
Yeah, and also I think that what became really urgent to South Africa is they had to raise the reputation of their wines. I mean, they're now making, I think, some of the most exciting wines in the world, but by talking about old vineyards in South Africa, they were able to really express this heritage that actually would otherwise not necessarily be recognized. Now, I think it's a slightly different situation in Spain because there is the awareness of the long heritage is there. But what has struck me is that even coming around Amaren, actually all this incredible work that you're doing, the project that Ruben has implemented, it's not central to the brand. Mm-hmm. It's not as central in your communications and in your identity as it could be. And I think I would just say, if you make it more central, you will find it really, I think, really powerful. And actually it's the same with, for example, some of the wineries I mentioned in the presentation, even Numancia, they hadn't put it centrally, even though actually their quality and their ethos is really influenced by this concern for this heritage and old vineyards.
Okay, hold on, let me just a little bit. Juan Luis, y bueno, esto es para Rubén, para Juan Luis, para John, para Óscar y para al final un poco para todos. El debate ahora va un poquito sobre eso, ¿no? Sobre la manera de generar credibilidad y la necesidad de que haya marcas tractoras, marcas líderes que impulsen un poco este movimiento de apuesta por la viña vieja. Ponemos el ejemplo de Amaren. Y Sara lo que dice es que efectivamente lo que ha visto y lo que está haciendo Amaren, el trabajo de Rubén y todo el trabajo que estáis haciendo en el viñedo es absolutamente crucial, pero que lo que ella ve es que eso no se refleja en la botella, no se refleja en la etiqueta. Tiene que venir ella, verlo con sus propios ojos, pero eso, el consumidor al tomar una botella de Amaren no ve todo ese trabajo. O sea, es question of communication, right? Un esfuerzo, o sea, lo que ella sugiere es generar un mayor impacto a nivel comunicación para que el trabajo que vosotros estáis desarrollando, que es absolutamente magnífico, pueda llegar a nosotros.
Es el punto central de comunicación.
Que sea el pilar básico de la comunicación.
Podría ser, digamos.
Sí, además, una de las cosas que en esta familia tenemos claro es el mantener el viñedo viejo hasta cuando ya no puede más, ¿no? Entonces, ha habido muchas veces por proveedores de uva que han cambiado de tractor y ya no entra en la viña porque son viñas que tienen 80 años o 90 y las quieren arrancar. Y entonces nosotros hemos dicho, esto no puede ser así. Y hemos cogido y le hemos cambiado esa viña por otra más joven de 20 años que se siente más a gusto con su tractor.
Lo que está contando Juan Luis, was easy for me to talk in Spanish. No, what he's saying is, of course, the Luis Cañas, familia Luis Cañas philosophy is to keep betting on all vines, above all, until the last day of life of this vine, okay, is their philosophy of work. And they have some examples of vine growers working with Amaren and Luis Cañas, that they own a 80 years old vineyard, and at a certain point the vine grower changes the tractor, the truck, and the truck is bigger, so he cannot get into the vineyard, so he decided to arrancar, to
It was
replant. this 80 years old vineyard, and they say, hey, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Let's switch it.
Yep.
Let me give you this 25 years old vineyard, and you give me that.
We heard that story of the vineyard written on the first day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they are
Like trading cards
absolutely.
almost. Yeah, absolutely.
What they are saying is that Amar and Luis Cañas, they are absolutely betting on old wine. Although probably is not the most economical, wise decision, but they really believe.
Exacto. Entonces, para que veáis un poquito cuál es la media de edad que tenemos, en Luis Cañas pueden ser 48 años de edad media
Yeah, the median average of the
y
vineyard,
56 años en Amaren.
and 56 in Amar.
Es decir, nosotros podíamos tener, claro, depende qué consideremos como viña vieja. Si consideramos viña vieja de 35 años para arriba, tenemos posiblemente 800 parcelas.
Yeah.
Pero
He's saying that if we consider old vine, a vineyard over 35 years old, they have
800 parcelas.
800 vineyards.
Pero nosotros no estamos de acuerdo con ello. Nosotros un viñedo viejo,
¿Para ti cuánto es?
para nosotros un viñedo viejo lo empezamos a considerar a partir de los 50 años.
Okay,
Very interesting.
for Amar and Luis Cañas, an old vine is not 35, as Viñedos Singulares Rioja says, but 50.
Is that following like your actually, our Luis Cañas has done the average 30 to 35 years.
I think Hannah had a question.
Oh,
You
yeah.
had your yes.
No, well, thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah.
remembering. It's really great to talk about iconic producers such as yourselves and Eben Sadi about really leading the charge in terms of preservation of old vines. But my head is kind of going to the smaller producers, the person that's just inherited a couple of hectares of old vines, and costs are rising, everything is much more expensive, and it's much more financially viable to them to uproot it, ruin all that history in exchange for something that makes more grapes, that will make more wine. I was wondering if there was anyone who had any thoughts on how we can incentivize these people, because I'm sure added up, that's like a very vast proportion of some of the old vine vineyards.
Es que su principal preocupación en la que ella está pensando no es solo en las bodegas icónicas, que a lo mejor sí se pueden permitir a lo mejor pues, el preservar una viña de 80 años, pero ella está pensando en los pequeños productores que solo tienen un viñedo o dos viñedos y que su tentación puede ser arrancar viña vieja, plantar otra que le produzca más cantidad y por tanto puedan elaborar más vino y en definitiva ganar más vino.
Y más cuando antes estaba subvencionado.
Claro, entonces que cómo se puede, bueno, que si, no sé, que cómo se puede preservar eso sin ser una bodega grande, siendo un productor pequeñito o un viticultor pequeño.
Can I step in with an answer to that?
Yes.
Actually, it's based on something that Giles...
If you've got the mic. Let's take
Oh, sorry.
based on something that Giles said, talking about old vine garnacha in South Australia, which for many years was completely undervalued. Nobody was interested in it. You've got people like Cirillo, who's the reason they've got these 160-year-old garnacha vines is because they used to sell the juice for people to make home winemaking. The market. In the last 15 years, the wholesale price of old vine Grenache has increased 5 times. And that's because of people like Giles with his Thistledown, because of people like Taras from Achota Barrels and his Fugazi, his 186.
Desde mi punto de vista de Rioja, por dar dos respuestas, una preguntaba sobre cómo se puede revertir la situación de los jóvenes, o sea, de los pequeños viticultores. En Rioja, actualmente, lo que está ocurriendo es que los pequeños viticultores son gente muy mayor, jubilada, que están en el cambio generacional y que son incapaces de poner en valor en el mercado esa botella de vino, y entonces lo que están haciendo es vendiendo todo a las grandes bodegas.
So what he said, answering your question, what he's saying is that from his point of view here in Rioja, what is happening is that sadly small producers with a single unique old vineyard, what they are doing is this. Normally they are old men who are just retiring or even over retiring, and what they are doing is just with no sons or daughters that are taking over the responsibility, they are selling the vineyard to big, large companies. So that's what is happening, unfortunately.
Sobre todo todos los grandes grupos de fuera que han venido a Rioja y que necesitan comprar esa viña vieja para prestigiar su marca. Macán, Carrovejas.
Right, so big groups that are coming to Rioja, big wine groups that are present in different wine regions and are coming to Rioja, they need to build a prestige brand. So which is the first step? Buying old vineyards. So it's like the perfect combination of big groups coming, buying to a man who wants to sell because he's retiring.
Y la respuesta sobre cómo podemos mejorar eso de poner en valor es muy fácil.
He says it's very easy how to put value to all vines.
Las bodegas tienen que dejar de enseñar depósitos y naves de barricas y enseñar viñedo.
Okay, he says that wineries need to stop showing barriques and inox vats and showing vineyard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y una pregunta para Juan Luis y para el grupo comercial. Es meter el dedo en la llaga, pero ¿qué le supone a una bodega como Amaren tener tantos vinos parcelarios con pequeñas producciones y qué le supone para ellos de beneficio estar dentro de viñedos singulares de la denominación de origen Rioja?
Okay, what he's asking is, what is the benefit for a winery like Amaren is to elaborate and commercialize small production of single vineyards, and what is the benefit of being included in viñedos singulares Rioja New Single?
Para mí sus estándares están muchísimo más altos que lo que marca el Consejo. Entonces, para mí, desprestigia estar dentro de esa marca.
What Carlos believes is that Amaren's philosophy is above this quality seal from Rioja. So the Viñedos Singulares seal is like a misprestige for Amaren because they are above that. That's what he thinks, and the answer, sorry, the question for John and...
Bueno, estoy contigo. Mi padre durante muchos años intentó luchar porque el viñedo singular en Rioja estuviera a partir de 80 años.
Okay, John, he said that he was with his dad, with Juan Luis, fighting with the Consejo Regulador, trying to convince that the viñedo singular needed to be over 80.
Las grandes bodegas no nos lo permitieron
But the big players said,
y pusieron 35 años.
and they said 35.
Nosotros, el primer año, podíamos haber metido con esa legislación hasta 500 viñedos singulares.
Yeah, and when the legislation was approved, they could include
500 viñedos.
500 different viñedos singulares.
Pero pusimos 9.
But they put just 9.
Salimos como viñedo singular con los 9. En mi opinión, hay organismos que no han potenciado el valor de un viñedo singular. Y la familia Luis Cañas hemos valorado que el viñedo siga siendo singular, pero que el organismo de etiqueta de viñedo singular no vale la pena. Y entonces hemos decidido tomar la dirección de defender la finca, de defender la marca y de salirnos de la calificada de etiqueta de viñedo singular.
Okay, so what he's saying is that after
No sé si
this,
te he
what they
respondido
are-
bien.
A partir de la siguiente vuelta.
Yeah, what they are saying is that what they are relying on is that, of course, they will continue their bet on the viñedo singular philosophy, their philosophy, over what the Consejo Regulador says. They say that the label, the viñedo singular from Rioja, is not that useful for them to put value to the work that they are doing and the work that they are doing.
So that's communication.
I think-
That's what, as journalists, we've got to get that out. That actually, you're going above
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Que vosotros
When
estáis por
people do
encima
that,
de
we need
esa
to
cosa.
communicate that they're going above and beyond this.
Yeah, I mean, can't you have both? It may not be 80 years old, but it's 35, it's something. Can you not have that and state the age of the vineyard, and which is much older than 35 years,
Yeah.
and have another seal of approval? At least it's recognition. So for if you think of just the consumer,
Would
they're like, well, it sounds good to me, Viñedo Singular, but if you can add further to that, have this, in the Old Vine Conference seal of approval, I like that idea, I like that on some of my wines, but why not have both?
Lo que dice Richard es que a él Viñedo Singular le suena bien como sello, como etiqueta, pero ¿por qué no poner también algo más que ponga en valor verdaderamente el viñedo? Entonces, cuando Sara decía antes, hace un rato, lo de ese sello de Old Vine certificado de verdad, que eso de alguna manera, o sea, jugar con los dos sellos, Viñedo Singular y además Viñedo Viejo, no sé si sería poner demasiado logo.
Bueno, te compro la idea.
He buys your idea.
Okay.
Porque es...
Yes, it's £1 million. Thank you, sir.
Porque es algo que hemos estado luchando un grupo de bodegas en Rioja Alavesa, donde también queríamos invitar a, porque es un paisaje igual o parecido, a todos los que son de la Sonsierra. Ahí entran dos pueblos, Ábalos y San Vicente.
Yeah, he said that they have been fighting for this in Rioja Alavesa and two more villages which are not properly geographically, politically Rioja Alavesa, but geographically they are the Sonsierra, which is all the villages, Samaniego, etc., and San Vicente de la Sonsierra and Ábalos, which are Rioja Alta.
Entonces, el trabajo que fuimos realizando durante 2 años, hasta que llegó la pandemia, ahí se paró, estábamos buscando cómo diferenciarnos. Es decir, en Rioja es muy grande y aquí caben todos, pero de alguna forma, cómo diferenciarnos para dar a conocer qué es lo que tenemos aquí. Aquí tenemos un paisaje distinto.
Okay, so what they fought for is, Rioja is very big, and everybody can be in Rioja, within Rioja, but what we do have here is different, absolutely different in Rioja Alavesa. So how can we differentiate ourselves among the others?
Y entonces, una de las cosas que era, todo el mundo que entre, aquí se hace un club que pueda entrar todo el mundo de la Sonsierra con unas premisas que es viticultura sostenible, orgánica, ecológica. No se puede comprar uva al resto de Rioja Alavesa ni a Rioja, salvo que estés certificado en este club, de tal manera que podamos tener un sello donde muchos de los viñedos o parte importante de los viñedos tenga un sello que indique claramente que esto es diferente. Esto es, a partir de aquí tienen 50 años o a partir de aquí tienen 80.
Okay, so let me just a little bit. Okay, what they fought for, and they were pushing it before the COVID, 2 years before the COVID, was that they wanted to create a seal of excellence of producers in the Rioja Alavesa and Sonsierra area, that is where we are right now, with producers, small producers that work with over, let's say, 50 years old vines, sustainable organic viticulture, and you cannot buy, as a single producer, grapes from outside this area. So if this is, if we do all agree, then we can create a seal of excellence of wines coming from this specific winery.
Quiero darte las gracias, Sara, porque esto estaba como un poco parado otra vez, por la pandemia, la crisis y tal, pero me ha gustado que lo hayas dicho porque yo creo que voy otra vez a volver a empezar a reunirme con la administración, con las bodegas, para ver si esto podemos sacarlo adelante. Entonces, de verdad que te doy las gracias.
Thank you, because after this, he's thinking about starting the project again and start talking to the different administrations and wineries in the area to push again to search for these seals of excellence.
Because you know what makes the difference is just really great wine. It sounds so simple, but actually, if you are making beautiful, unique, nuanced, great wine, that is the most powerful thing you can do. And then if you say one of the reasons that one of the our quality factors is that we're all about the vineyard, and we really believe in this, the lessons of this more craft, heritage, connected viticulture. You just need half a dozen producers. In fact, you can do it with 3, you know. You just need producers with a shared vision and commitment, and then you're making the great wine, and then it's just really about communicating. And if you study the history of really successful appellations, for example, the development of Champagne and all these kind of things, it started with a small group of like-minded producers who said, we don't want our region to be associated with bad wine. We want great wine and we champion it. So, yeah. Sorry.
No, lo que estoy diciendo es que, bueno, que por supuesto que ella te apoya en eso y que en realidad es una manera de destacarse entre la multitud y que con que haya 3, 4, 5, 6 pequeños productores o productores o bodegas que estén trabajando precisamente en este sello de calidad y que pongan en valor todo esto, que sería un gran paso adelante. Ponía el ejemplo de champán, de la zona de champán, que ha habido productores que simplemente han querido entrar por el sello de champán, pero elaborando vinos mucho más ligeros y los productores de champán dijeron, yo no quiero estar en la misma clasificación que ellos, ¿no? Con lo cual, bueno, ella lo que sugiere y a lo que anima es esto, porque al final es una cuestión más de comunicación y de apoyar esta estrategia.
Dan,
yeah, just to throw my 2 cents in, I want to caution perhaps against excessive labeling and terminology. I think it's very helpful for the trade because it's transparent, and I like that, to say that you see this stamp and seal on there, that this means that this vineyard is 80 years old. That's fantastic. But for an average consumer, there's a lot of noise. And I think particularly in an area like this where you already have Reserva, Gran Reserva, and terminology, that people can get really weighed down. And so I think just remember who we're doing it for, whereas if we're going to put another label or another certification, we're doing it for the trade, and then the trade has to take the responsibility to put their marketing cap on for the average consumer. And so, you know, for me, that's where the storytelling comes in, and it's Old Vines, I love being the underdog story because it is not the easiest way to grow grapes. And I think going back to kind of Hannah's question, I think if I'm a small, young business person, you know, the romance is fantastic, but for me, my spreadsheet tells me what I can do and what I can't do. It's a numbers game. And so case studies of successful business growth based on old vine viticulture would be incredibly helpful to prove that there is a business model where it works, because otherwise I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of case studies out there that says grow more grapes, make more wine, make more money. You know, please.
Lo que ha contado ha sido 2 cosas un poco distintas. Uno, hablando de los sellos de calidad, él advierte un poco de del excesivo uso de demasiados logos, ¿no? Que para el trade, para los profesionales de la hostelería le viene muy bien porque ayuda a categorizar y a poner un poco, a clasificar de alguna manera la calidad de los vinos, pero para el consumidor puede ser demasiada sobreinformación poner, pues eso, el sello de consejo regulador encima, Old Vine encima, como que hay que tener cuidado también un poco de no saturar a un consumidor que en realidad tampoco tiene tanto conocimiento. Y ahondando en la pregunta que había hecho antes Hannah sobre qué hacer con los pequeños viticultores, al final lo que dice es que por una parte sí sería interesante mostrar casos de lo que comentaba Carlos, de pequeños viticultores, pero que hayan sido exitosos en su modelo de negocio, trabajando con viñedo viejo de una manera como lo hacéis vosotros, pero que al mismo tiempo el romanticismo está muy bien, pero que obviamente la gente quiere comer, ¿no? Y tiene que pagar facturas. Entonces, que al final es trabajar en un business case y saber lo que se puede y lo que no se puede hacer. El romanticismo está muy bien, de quiero tener solo dos cepas en esta viña, pero si mi alimentación depende, pues evidentemente tengo que producir más vino para facturar más y no más.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No, I think just really, just the one last bit, the Good Wine, Good People, the website that I run, the retail website, has an old vine section. I think it came about very naturally that a quarter or 20% of my portfolio qualifies as old vine wines. That's because I'm attracted to the story, I'm attracted to the romance, and I'm generally, honestly, truly attracted to the wines themselves. I think, as Sarah said, you have to make great wine. That's really important. But the best advice I think I've heard was stop doing pictures of barrels on your website and do pictures of your vineyards. I have a women winemakers section. I have a low ABV section. I have this old vine section because I'm trying to be the storyteller that someone can latch on to some aspect of the wine. I don't have a typical way of writing tasting notes because sometimes I think the viticulture is the story, sometimes I think the people is the story, sometimes I just think the wine tastes really darn good. And so what I think the great idea is, again, reminding people that this is an agricultural product, and old vine viticulture is a way more sexy agriculture way than monoculture, big tractor rows, lots of passes, lots of sprays. That's industrial agriculture, and I think if we remind people that we're farmers first, I think that's the easy way to do it before putting on another label. I'm done.
All right. Good luck. No, bueno, lo que ha dicho es que él, como profesional de la hostelería, al final él tiene como un 15 o un 20% de sus vinos proceden de viña vieja, y que lo que está haciendo, por ejemplo, Alliance, de poner en su página web este vino procede de viñedo viejo, le ayuda de alguna manera a categorizar, pero que al mismo tiempo lo que él pide es que, por ejemplo, en las páginas web de las bodegas dejemos de enseñar barricas y salas de depósitos y lo que enseñemos sea viñedo. Un actor grande en un viñedo gigante, al final a él le seduce mucho más la idea de, bueno, pues lo que venimos a hablar.
I mentioned value earlier, and I think one of the things that's really key to understand about old vines is that by their very nature, they're not fashion chasing. And if we look at where the wine world was maybe 20 years ago, all the things that were valued were making wines in a kind of French archetype style. So people were trying to make Bordeaux everywhere. And that means planting Cabernet, that means planting Merlot, that means planting Pinot Noir, all sorts of places where it shouldn't be. You can't do that if you're valuing old vines. So you kind of have to learn to value that thing that is already there. And you see this slowly happening around the world. Like I was in Cyprus a couple of weeks back, and they're finally starting to appreciate the fact that these 100-year-old vineyards of Zinastiri are probably more important than the vineyard that they've just planted 10 years ago of Viognier. And it's really key for producers to understand the value that they have already there, and that the market will pick up on these. Telling consumers that this is from 90-year-old vines is a really easy thing for people to understand. Like, you don't have to tell them a long story about what 90-year-old means. That's really old. It's a very simple way to add value to something you're putting in front of them, and I think consumers latch onto that quite easily.
Lo que he intentado contar es determinados, hay productores y productores, ¿no? Y que muchas bodegas en el mundo, no en Rioja, pero en el mundo, han intentado hacer un vino de Burdeos en otras partes del mundo, y plantar Cabernet Sauvignon y plantar Merlot en todo el mundo, y eso evidentemente funciona en algunos sitios, pero en otros, en la mayor parte de los sitios no. Y vuelvo a poner un poco de manifiesto la necesidad de que si un productor lo que tiene es un viñedo viejo, que se ponga en valor eso, ¿no? Y que al final, como profesional de la hostelería, en la carta de vinos, el sommelier con que diga, este vino tiene 90 años, ya está. Es un punto a favor y es una manera de diferenciar ese vino sobre lo demás, ¿no? Al final es un poco ahondar en lo que venimos contando de la necesidad de poner en valor esta apuesta por el vino viejo. Yo no sé si queréis decir.
Que no solo los 90 años, sino que da una tipicidad y una identidad a una zona.
Yeah, he said that this 90 years old vineyard gives authenticity, typicity to a certain value. Carlos. Sí. I think Julia and Sarah Jane are the only two people who didn't open their mouth at this point of the
Bueno, yo defiendo la idea clásica de lo que es el terroir, que el terroir es el suelo, la climatología, pero es la acción humana que ha hecho ese...
Carlos defends the concept of terroir, so the soil, the climate, but at the same time the work developed by the man.
Entonces, para mí es muy importante, no solamente, ahora que estaba viendo etiquetas por ahí y esas fotos de Luis Cañas, que para mí hay que poner en valor que la viña pertenece también generación tras generación a la misma propiedad. Para mí no es lo mismo que este señor tenga una viña, su hijo esté cultivando esas viñas que su padre y su abuelo ya tenían, y que viene generación tras generación a que yo soy una mega bodega con un poder adquisitivo, compro una viña que tiene años pero ha estado mal cuidada durante generaciones y de repente le pongo en valor el cuño de la antigüedad. Entonces, para mí es muy importante el hecho de paso generacional porque los valores de los padres y los abuelos han pasado de generación en generación y eso lo ha vivido la viña.
Yeah, what Carlos says is that he truly believes in the work that family business generation after generation. For Carlos, and he was in the picture of Luis Cañas, it's extremely important to know that this wine is coming from this vineyard who is managed by Juan Luis, who inherited this from his father, and now John is working with the vineyard. So you know the traceability of the vineyard, the life cycle of that vineyard, instead of big wine groups that are arriving in a certain region and say, okay, you have all that, okay, I buy your vineyard, but I don't know anything about the past, how you treated that in the past generations, and I just put my seal of I'm a big company and this is my old vineyard. So what he says is that it's extremely important to know the background and the story of this kind of family business vineyards.
It's a really good point, and actually, Paul, I know you've got some questions about the justification of maintaining old vines for producers.
I mean, we've touched on quite a lot of this topic already, on what makes old vines valuable in the market, or how you can justify old vines. But what I wanted to really find out from Juan Luis and from John is we've seen the work that you're doing and the admirable work that you're doing to preserve the vineyard, to study them and to see what's there. But can you, how far can you justify the work, the investment that you're doing in a commercial way?
Sí, la cuestión y el tema es cómo justificar esta apuesta que vosotros hacéis por la viña vieja, que a lo mejor económicamente en sí misma no es lo más apropiado, pero cómo justificar económicamente la apuesta por esta viticultura en concreto.
Bueno, nosotros, al ser, yo empiezo por lo primero. Somos una familia en la cual no tenemos que repartir dinero a nadie. Entonces, nunca sacamos dinero de las bodegas, siempre se quedan. Entonces, nuestra forma de ser, nuestro estilo es, no nos importa ganar. Es verdad, hay que ganar dinero para cubrir todos los gastos, pero a nosotros, a los proveedores, les exigimos, ahí está Rubén, les exigimos mucho. Les exigimos hacer una viticultura orgánica, que es más cara que la tradicional. Les exigimos tirar uvas, les exigimos vendimiar una parcela 5 veces porque son variedades distintas. ¿Qué es lo que hacemos? Pagar más. Claro, si pagas más, ganas menos. Pero es que a nosotros no nos importa ganar.
Okay, so let me see if I can translate this properly, because what you said is critical. He says that they are a family business and they don't need, as I was saying before, they don't need to split the money among partners, etc. But for them it's extremely important to, for example, working with a vine grower and force them to work in an organic way, which is much more expensive, to harvest one single vineyard 5 different times because they are different varieties. So, I mean, for the viticulture, this is more expensive, so they pay more, which means that probably they will earn more, but they don't care, because what they truly believe in is in all the cycle of production, and if you as a viticulture, you are working harder and working more hours than your neighbor, okay, you need to get more money. That's as simple as this, right? If that means that they will earn, as a company, less money than the neighbor, that's okay for them. But they bet and rely on this philosophy.
And these relationships with the viticulturists.
Absolutely.
The relationship is more important than the bottom line.
Absolutely. Dice que la relación con el viticultor es mucho más importante que la línea de abajo que te va a decir cuánto dinero has ganado.
Eso es.
But I
Entonces,
think, sorry.
excuse me.
Really, you're describing it's a virtuous cycle. So if you have the vision to make the great wine, what do you need? You need the best quality grapes. So it's you've made the commitment for quality. So actually, you are rewarded because you have that reputation and you've created the high quality. So of course you can pay more. So really, you've done the kind of as an individual producer, you've shown kind of the virtuous cycle between production, value adding, and the market, because the wines are great.
Lo que dice es que habéis conseguido crear el círculo vicioso perfecto, ¿no? De todo el producto.
Círculo vicioso.
Perdón, el círculo virtuoso. Perfecto. Okay? Sorry. Porque pagáis más al viticultor, al final trabajáis un poco en la apuesta por la calidad y eso os genera al final una mayor construcción de valor añadido y eso se traduce en el mercado. ¿Cuál es el círculo perfecto de la filosofía?
Ok. Nosotros, por ejemplo, ahora miramos a 15 años.
You're looking 15 years ahead.
¿Qué queremos tener? ¿Más dinero? ¿O queremos tener mejor reputación, más prestigio, estar situados en un nivel más alto?
What do we want to have in the next 15 years? More money or more reputation, more quality in our wines, more prestige in our brand?
Ok, la segunda parte.
Second part.
El dinero solo sirve para pagar a todo el mundo, a todos los proveedores, todos los empleados. Entonces nosotros lo que queremos es que dentro de 15 años nuestros proveedores crezcan con nosotros, de tal manera que no tengan que marcharse del pueblo, que no tengan que vender su explotación, sino que lo hagan tan bien que no arranquen el viñedo viejo, que se le pague muy bien el viñedo viejo, de tal manera que cuando lleguen a 15 años ellos estén a la misma altura que nosotros en la proporción que sea.
So what they are saying is that money is only useful for paying bills. Okay, so and that's basically it. So if they look 15 years ahead, what they want to build is a relationship in which this vine grower is paying properly, is being paid properly, and he has no temptation of selling my old vine to a big producer because I'm being paid properly in a good way. So in 15 years, they could say, hey, friend, my partner, we are on the same page after 15 years. So building these strong relationships is what they are betting on.
And also that's a very important part of sustainability. Because that when they grow the vineyard, if the son is looking at the daddy, working every day very, very hard, at the end of the day, they haven't got the money to at least live well. What's going to do the son? He's going to move away to another place. So that sustainable way, in order to take care of people, to fix people, because that's a trouble nowadays. Ruben and his team is a whole team, but it's difficult trying to find people to work in the vineyard. That's something we really think. There's not only here the trouble. There are many places around the world with no workers for the vineyard. That's another.
Actually, we have a member in Sicily on Etna, a member of the Old Vine Conference. They're called an I Vigneri, and they were founded by a great enologist, Italian enologist, viticulturist called Salvo Fotti. And his whole ethos is to raise the prestige and respect of viticultural work. Because he says that as a society, we've made a really big mistake in that we've lost the respect for agricultural know-how. And his project basically was to go to these very old vineyards, typically owned by very old men, and they were under threat because, as you've described, for Rioja, with very big players coming in, this is also happening in Sicily, but essentially the gentlemen, the old men, keep their vineyards, but then Salvo Forti has established an academy of viticulture, works with great consultants, and he's basically attracted lots of the young people of the area to come and work in his academy. The wine sells out. It's like £50 retail wine. It's great wine, and to be part of the I Vigneri, the viticultors group is high prestige, it's high status, and they're proud of it. And so that's also, I think, an important part of the cycle. It's called I Vigneri. They're on Etna.
Etna, Greece.
Yeah, Sicily. Sorry, yeah, Sicily.
No, sorry, está contando el caso de un ejemplo que le ha venido a la mente, que es muy parecido a lo que estáis haciendo vosotros en Etna, en Sicilia, que al final era pues, un pequeño productor que empezó a buscar también esos viñedos viejos, y al final ha construido una pequeña comunidad también, y un pequeño grupo de pequeños viticultores, y ha creado una serie de vinos de muy alto valor añadido que vende a 50 euros en una tienda, y que al final, bueno, pues ha conseguido crear también una marca y un prestigio y un posicionamiento que le recuerda mucho a lo que estáis haciendo vosotros.
I think there's something very similar going on in Catalonia. There's the big cooperative Unio in Reus, and where there have been old farmers who've either given up farming, or they're too old, or they've passed away. The lands have been handed down to their children. The children are not interested in farming. They're living in Barcelona or wherever. The cooperative, well, I don't think they're allowed to own the land, but they can manage it. And so they take on the responsibility of managing the vineyards and keeping them going, and then giving some money to the family that own it, but relieving them of all the burden of having to look after the vineyard during the year.
Right. Bueno, contaba por el ejemplo de una cooperativa en Cataluña.
Unio in Reus.
Ok, en Reus. Que al final, bueno, pues el ejemplo de un viticultor que se jubila o que muere, la siguiente generación no se quiere hacer cargo de ello, y al final esta cooperativa lo que hace es trabajar esa viña vieja para que no se pierda, para que no caiga en el olvido y que siga de alguna manera funcionando, y pagar una renta al viticultor. Al final es un poco ese ejemplo de seguir poniendo en valor el viña viejo.
Okay. So we've established, I think, that there is both a value in terms of quality and also in perception for old vines. With the right communication, it can be meaningful to the market. And I've just got a couple of more specific questions about what your plans are for the future with the varieties that you've recuperated from your old vines. So this is more of a question for Ruben. Do you want to ask these?
Yeah, so we've been looking at, yesterday we had this fascinating tasting where we tasted forgotten or undiscovered old grape varieties, or rediscovered old grape varieties in Rioja. And we sort of touched on the topic of why they were there in the first place. Calagrano, you said maybe people were planting it because it generated volume and was a low alcohol, high yielding grape variety. Do you think that can be applied to all the other grape varieties that you're discovering? That there were reasons why people planted those in the first place, or do you think it was more accidental.
¿Has entendido? Sí, yo creo que sí. Bueno, lo que está preguntando Sara es que cuál es el siguiente paso, que cuál es un poco la visión de qué se va a hacer con todo este trabajo que estáis desarrollando con Rubén y todos vosotros de recuperación de las variedades, ¿no? Y que cuál es un poco la visión para los próximos años.
Y planteaba también que unas estaban localizadas, el Calagra... Bueno, yo creo que intervenían dos factores. Una, en algunos sitios sí realmente ellos buscaban qué tipo de variedades se ajustaban mejor al tipo de terreno y los plantaban porque sabían que ahí iban a funcionar bien, que el suelo tenía las necesidades que requerían las plantas, y en otras muchas situaciones eran accidental. Tenemos que... ¿Sigo?
No, let's say there are like two phases, two examples. One example of people who they were eager and searching for a place with this variety because they truly believe that with this terroir, this variety could be grown in a proper way, and a second one who accidentally just planted it, right?
El ejemplo del primer caso son las cabezadas. Variedades blancas más productivas que nuestros tempranillos, nuestro pino que nuestras uvas tintas, y que requieren menos suelos con menos vigor y soportan mejor las sequías, se ponían en las zonas más altas, en las zonas más pobres, y ahí funcionaban y tenían producción, que al final es lo que ellos querían. Ellos lo que querían era tener uva. En esos sitios ponías tempranillo y la producción era muy baja, algo que ellos evidentemente no querían.
An example of the first case was when we talked about the cabezadas. You remember what cabezadas is? The grapes that they put it on the beginning or at the end of the aisle, okay? The white varieties had a larger yield instead of, for example, when they planted tempranillo in the cabezadas, which the yield was very, very limited.
Y el segundo ejemplo, tenemos que pensar en cómo se hacían esas plantaciones. Esas plantaciones que se injertaba en campo, tenías que coger los sarmientos en invierno. Un sarmiento en invierno es difícilmente diferenciable uno del otro. Entonces cometían ellos muchos errores también no buscados. Viñedos que tenían un montón de variedades, ellos cogían sarmientos para injertar y ahí ya ellos mismos iban produciendo una mezcla que luego se reproducía en el viñedo nuevo cuando hacían la nueva plantación. Y por eso tienes 3 cepas de tempranillo, una de Graciano, un Benedicto, otra vez 3 de tempranillo, que es lo que querían poner ellos, y luego aparece una Bobal, tenían mezcla de todo. Y si luego, lo que hemos hablado de antes, y si en la cabezada intentaban posicionar un poquito mejor la Viura, la Malvasía riojana, a veces la Garnacha, a veces el Graciano.
Okay, this is a sentence that Oscar wants to
the way they used to replant in the old times, they used to do the crafting during the winter. So many of them during the winter is quite difficult to recognize what variety you're trying to craft. So that was sort of difficult. Most of the times, the white crafting, they dedicated for the head parts of the vineyard. And then, as Ruben was explaining, on the slopes and flat plats or the rest. But that's why we've got that diversion of different varieties, because most of the time they didn't really know what they were crafting.
Still blends happen almost accidental because they didn't know what
Accidental magic.
But that concept, but that idea of accidental beauty is something that you find across all creation, all kind of acts of creation. And I think grape wine is a sort of artistic creation because it's a result of very clear intent. But, you know, when you think of stories of not just artistic creation, but even things like medical breakthroughs, there's often this theme of we got lucky, and you know, and there's the accident that you then has come of this sort of intersection with a person, a place, trying to solve a problem. You get lucky, or you simply do what you have to do, and then something results, which, oh, actually this is really unique and tied to this place and to that sort of almost moment of having to solve a problem or just simply live. But that's a really common idea across all of humanity when it comes to valuing beautiful things, because you can't predict when those moments are going to come. But this is really, it's the essence of human ingenuity. So that this sort of, oh, well, you know, they might have mixed it up, or they were just doing what they had to do because, you know, it was winter and it was cold and dark and they, you know, just wanted to get the grafting done. That is actually, as you say, this accidental magic gives us so many beautiful and unique things, and that's what we have to preserve.
Somehow undermined something else I wanted to ask, which was, what do we have to learn from our ancestors? Were they actually slightly cleverer than we are these days in their knowledge about husbandry, about farming and understanding of grape varieties and soils? And when you're saying it's sort of accidental magic, it rather undermines that story. But I think there is something that in that old knowledge that we talked about, sort of the rush in the 80s to replant bigger yields and get more wine out, that we perhaps lost some of that clever knowledge that was there before.
Well, lo que está contando Paul ahora es que
Sorry.
es una cuestión que quería plantear también, que muchas veces si tenemos algo que aprender nosotros, vosotros, de nuestros antepasados, en el sentido de, tú defendías que esos descubrimientos eran casi por accidente, ¿no? por casualidad. Y que si
Voz.
Entonces, que si en realidad hoy ahora nosotros tenemos que aprender algo de cómo se trabajaba la viticultura hace 80 años, ¿no?
Yo no defendía que era accidente, defendía que eran las dos cosas, que había una parte que era buscada, las cabezadas, zonas que les interesaba tener otro tipo de variedades, y que había otra parte que sí era accidental, que iban mezclando.
Yeah, one part of this discovery was searched on purpose. The cabezadas, all these things. The other thing was accidentally found.
Y creo que sí debemos aprender del accidente mágico que decía Sarah, porque es muy interesante de cara a la viticultura actual.
Yeah, and he says that we should learn of this magic that Sarah was saying before, this way of working viticulture.
En una zona como esta, en la que prácticamente tenemos un monocultivo de viñedo, si además de ser solo un viñedo tenemos solo una variedad que mayoritariamente sea tempranillo, estamos empobreciendo el paisaje y el cultivo.
Yeah, what he says is that if in this region we only work with one product, which is grape, we only grow vineyard and grapes, and the majority is just one variety, which is tempranillo. We are it's poor. I mean, we are
the same clone of tempranillo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are losing the diversity that this world can offer, right? If we just work with one single product, one single variety.
Si introducimos variedades con diferentes ciclos de maduración, variedades con diferentes ciclos de floración, tendrán mayor riqueza y mayor capacidad de albergar diferentes especies que necesitemos que están dentro de los viñedos con nosotros.
Yeah, so if what's obvious, right? if we work with different varieties, we will have the possibility and the richness of playing with more ingredients, more varieties, which are already in our vineyards. So it's a way of
and also different ripening process. For example, Brasano takes place a month after a Tempranillo. So now with the climate change, that's something we're very interested to. We're looking for another different clones in order to the ripening takes a little bit later. And that's so important. That diversity is going to provide us many different colors to paint something very nicer.
Luego tenemos que pensar también que es muy interesante y muy inteligente el tener variedades diferentes a la hora de protegerte contra patógenos, contra enfermedades. Una variedad muy sensible como el tempranillo a una determinada enfermedad, si ese año realmente tienes problemas con esa enfermedad, arrasa o tienes una disminución de cosecha muy importante. Al contrario, si tienes diferentes variedades con diferentes resistencias, diferentes sensibilidades, como el ejemplo que poníamos ayer del garró resistente a enfermedades fúngicas, siempre estarás más protegido.
Yeah, it's a question also of surviving even, because if you only work with Tempranillo, and the Tempranillo has a disease, so the production of this year is coming down dramatically. It's a big problem, but if you have the possibility of working with different varieties, like the example of Garreau, which is more sensible to, more resistant to fungus or this kind of diseases, you will be more protected against these kind of risks.
Y eso es algo muy importante que les servía en los viñedos hace 80 años.
So 80 years ago it was really useful.
A lo mejor una parte de la cosecha se les echaba a perder, pero otras plantas sobrevivían y tenían cosecha, tenían producción.
Of the vineyard could be damaged, so your production that year was lower, but if you had another part of the vineyard who was healthy with these other varieties, you could save the year.
Y algo muy simple como una helada primaveral.
Yeah, spring frost.
Hay diferencias en la brotación de los viñedos de 15-20 días según las variedades. Variedades que se helaban y que se destruía por completo la cosecha y otras variedades un poquito más tardías que aguantaban y por lo menos producían algo que tenían para ese año.
Right, so yeah, a few years ago, spring frost could came, and as the sprout is different, if talking about different varieties, the possibility of surviving this frost was higher if we were playing with different varieties.
Y por último, para nosotros es muy importante tener diferentes variedades dentro del viñedo y lo explicamos con un ejemplo muy tonto pero que se entiende muy bien. Si nosotros tenemos solo uva tempranillo, que es muy buena, es como si a un pintor le das solo el color azul para hacer un cuadro. Si es un profesional, si es un gran pintor, hará un cuadro maravilloso, pero será el cuadro entero azul. Si tienes diferentes variedades, podrás aportar mucha mayor riqueza, mayor complejidad, luminosidad, oscurecerás otras zonas. Nos pasa lo mismo con los vinos. Somos capaces de construir vinos con muchos matices aromáticos, con muchas capas aromáticas, con más complejidad, con diferentes perfumes.
Yeah. Playing with different varieties, they are able to play and to elaborate different styles of wine, more complex, less complex, with a different aromatic performance, because you have the possibility of creating different profiles.
Exactly.
Sorry, this is the bad cop again. I don't know if you met me before, but as it happens, we are running out of time because we have a very interesting tasting in a few minutes. I don't know if Sarah, you want to summarize.
Yeah, well, I think basically there's really something in this, you know, and it's not just the story, although stories are important. It's a completely truthful, farming-led way of considering wine, and it's what we have to do. It is going to ensure, I think, the future of wine, and it really is also it's a kind of a gift when it comes to being able to talk about wine. So I think I'd just like to thank everyone for being here, for your, obviously to our hosts, Jean-Louis, and John. Sorry, I suddenly felt really tired and forgotten everyone's name. For hosting us, and to all of the guests for coming on the field trip. But I really hope that this could be an impetus to see this group in Spain come together, because, and a group in Rioja Alavesa to come together, because I really think you're in a position to lead. You have everything you need to lead, and I think that it would be an amazing thing just to add to your many accomplishments already for Old Vine heritage. So,
lo que ha dicho Sara, bueno, que por supuesto agradecer el trabajo de John, el tiempo de John y de Juan Luis y de Rubén aquí, y que en realidad ahora mismo ella cree que lo que estábamos hablando al principio de la sesión, que es crear ese grupo de trabajo para seguir poniendo en valor la viña vieja, que Amar en Luis Cañas, familia Luis Cañas en general, está en una posición y mejorarle para liderar este movimiento de volver a poner en valor todo este movimiento de Old Vine.
Okay. I just finished with one word of warning. Yeah. I think we've enjoyed this. We've talked about this amongst ourselves. We all enjoy it, and it's a little bit stroking ourselves on the back and giving ourselves a nice clap for recognising lovely Old Vine. But what we really have to do is we have to bring the consumer with us, and it's all very well us tasting and looking at Old Vines all the time, and absolutely adoring them, but we really have to make it a story that the consumer can enjoy and participate in as well. And we know that Sarah mentioned a £50 bottle of wine earlier. And so we think, well, how many people are going to buy a £50 bottle of wine? So we have to make this story very relevant to the consumer as well.
Lo que dice que también el siguiente paso también es llegar a hacer una historia que sea llegar al consumidor, porque al final todo esto está muy bien, estamos aquí, hemos disfrutado mucho, pero que al final el consumidor, que es el que al final va a comprar la botella, va a pedir tu vino en el restaurante, tienen que saberlo. Entonces el siguiente paso es que todo este mensaje, toda esta conversación diga algo.
Sorry, just as a final comment, I think obviously what you're doing is great, and I think if you have the chance of, if you can afford to create a new association and to lead the way, and I think Salvafort is a great example. They don't let any appellation, or just don't let Rioja tell you what you do. If you have to break the mold and to break the black sheep, just go ahead and do it. Don't let people tell you, okay, label this is old Weiss, it's 35 years. If you have to break the mold, then, go ahead. I think all the great wines historically are born that way, so just go for it.
El comentario es que si tenéis que ser la oveja negra y empujar, y aunque el Consejo Regulador diga que son 35 años, pero vosotros creéis que tenéis que ser 50, que sigáis a por ello, que apostéis por ello y que nadie os diga lo que tenéis que hacer, que es lo que estáis haciendo, así que él os anima de verdad a que sigáis por el camino.
Thank you, Juan Luis and John, Ruben, and everyone. Thank you.